How's it, guys? And another episode of the PH Journals podcast. This one might be a little bit shorter than most usual ones, and the reason is because I don't have much data. Everything that I've looked up, seen, um, I I have only got personal experience about this topic, and it's perfect because a lot of the time out in the bush, there you often come across a few moments in time where myths get busted, right? You've heard something over and over again. You've sat around a campfire. You've heard that certain scenarios might have worked for an individual, and some might not have. However, in this situation, I kind of find so. Anyway, to get to the point is this past weekend, I've had a bit of a gap. I've got a gap this weekend and I've got a gap next weekend. So I've been planning myself to do quite a bit of hunting. Next week, we've got our plan to head off the kudu as it was this weekend. And then next weekend, so next weekend, we're trying to jam about 3 hunts into one weekend, which is going to be a little bit tough, especially the way we've been doing it lately. But yeah, this weekend we head out. The weather hasn't been the best. We head out to go and do a bit of scouting for kudu. I've only ever shot one kudu bull in my life, and that was with my good mate, old Pat Dugan. The story behind it is it's an absolutely incredible story. A beautiful bull. He sits here in my lounge. Nice 50-inch kudu bull, East Cape bull, thick. It was an incredible hunt, one I'll never ever forget. However, this weekend we kind of went out and I had my bow with me. I was going to challenge myself on the bow. But about 15 minutes into our Friday hunt, I quickly realized that kudu hunt early morning, late evening, pretty much. There are certain scenarios, and I've seen them more often than not. It's happened to me many times where you will bump a kudu bull in more close to the midday range, 10, 11 o'clock in the morning, as they start feeding out into the warm, sunny spots. But on this particular farm that we were based ourselves on, it was very thick vegetation. And for some reason, I like to go down to the bottom of the valleys and class up against south or north facing slopes, depending on which time of the day you're hunting, right? But I soon realized when it comes to spiraled horned animals, Nyala, kudu, bushbuck, not so much with the eland, but when it comes to these sort of specific animals, your weather, you play a lot into your planning. And the weather seemed perfect for this weekend. It was going to be a very cold weekend, warming up into the midday for short 4 or 5 hours of warmth, and then cooling down very quickly into the evenings, which is ideal, right? Because the cooler temperatures force the kudu to move a little bit more as they graze into their bedding spots. But again, once we get into position, we kind of set ourselves up in the depths of this valley at about 6:30 in the morning, and we started glassing the slopes, right? And as the sun started coming over, you're looking for that shimmer in the bush that those big kudu bulls have, that shine on their horns, especially if they've rubbed it across a tree that's had a bit of frost or dew in the mornings. That shimmer on their horns kind of sticks out. And we get to this spot. Now, this farm, it's a cattle farm, cattle and sheep farm. It doesn't get hunted often. I think I've hunted there once in the past 4 or 5 years. And the gentleman who owns the farm hasn't been very big on hunting, so he's always liked to conserve his kudu. So we get there, and there's no movement. There's not a female in sight. There's not a bull in sight. All we kind of spotted the whole morning was mountain rebuck. So, not disheartened as the conditions couldn't be more perfect. So we head into the evening hunt, and once again, I think we bumped a cow with a small calf, and that was it. Saturday, pretty much the same sort of situation, and then Sunday we had Sunday left, and exactly the same thing. We bumped a couple of kudu cows, and that was it. all while this has been happening, I've been staying at home. I've got a bush pig bait just up the road here that I've only started feeding now again with the inconsistency of our weather. Um, and my pigs coming in, hitting the bait, and then skipping 2 or 3 weeks and then coming back. I've only really started putting in a lot of effort onto it now. So last night, I found myself at about 10 o'clock heading out to the bush pig bait to see if there was any sort of activity. Um, and I realized only there and then that it was full moon. Now, in the past, what what I might have taken into consideration was definitely the moon when playing with my spiraled horn animals. However, I sat around a campfire not so long ago at a outfitter that I was hunting with, and the conversation came up: does the moon play a big part in certain species in South Africa when it comes to hunting? Now, I've had a couple of personal experiences with this. Number one, the first experience I've had has been with fellow deer during the fellow deer rut. Now, I know deer are completely different to a lot of our antelope species. However, I felt that the fellow deer were rutting more during the full moon at night than they were during the day. And there can be a number of reasons for this, right? It could be cooler conditions, especially in April for the deer. Um, they feel a lot more safer from predators, um, and they are able to actually suss out situations a lot better at night. You know, the scent is a lot closer to the ground because of the cooler conditions. We've spoken about thermals, so there's a lot of scenarios that could play into this certain situation that kind of makes a lot of sense. But when it comes to our antelope species, you've got to look at it from a couple of different avenues, right? So I took this theory, and once the older gentleman at this fire washed it away and said, you know what, it's absolutely hogwash. Um, the moon doesn't play an effect on how certain animals behave. And I kind of took his word for it, right? And since then, we've never really played the moon into any sort of one of our predicaments. We've always considered it. Sorry, guys, I must clear my throat. I need to get water or something. Anyway, so we've always played it into certain scenarios in our hunting um opportunities, or whatever you want to call it, for the lack of a better word, where you've got clients out. You don't really want to make a big thing about the moon, because if you've heard and you kind of trust this older gentleman's intuition about the moon, you kind of think, well, hang on, yeah, maybe it doesn't have as a big effect during a natural rutting season than what it would have during the full-blown rutting season, right? So at the moment, towards the end of July, the rut for the kudu is completely over. So why should it have any sort of effect? And if it does, why is it having an effect on these bulls? So I've searched high and low. There's been so many mixed reactions online about the moon having an effect on our antelope species. So there were a couple of questions that came from this, especially over. I mean, I was sitting and chatting to a mate of mine while we were glassing, and I was like, "Is there a point in this whole thing where people are coming out to hunt our country? Are they taking these sort of things into consideration? I'm sure they're looking at the weather a couple of weeks before they get out here to know what they're going to pack and wear. Um, are they considering the moon? Are they considering coming out during the full moon periods for better opportunities on kudu, bushback, nyala, those sort of species that I felt um, play a lot more into a full moon or dark moon?" So as we playing up these certain different scenarios in our head, my personal experience, and I can only speak from my personal experience on this situation, is that I believe that the full moon, or any sort of moon that you can see more better than 50% than you would have during the darker phases of the moon, I think has a huge effect on how you hunt the spiral horned animals. And I particularly say spiraled horns because you guys got to remember a lot of the herd animals, they're going to seek sanctuary at night, right? They're gonna form and get into a place back, for instance, place back black wildebeest. They're going to get into an open clearing. A couple of them are going to bed down, and a couple of them are going to stand and keep a lookout for predators. And through the night, the whole roles reverse, right? But why will this have an effect on solitary animals or animals that are they've just finished the rut? They're trying to deplete, or they've depleted themselves during the rut, and now they're trying to build their condition up and head into the into the off season of hunting. Why will this have that sort of effect, right? Well, of course, predators are going to be able to see them better at night. So the more they keep moving, the better it's going to be. A lot of situations, pretty much like how I would imagine you would hunt elk, is glassing certain areas or being affiliated to certain areas. For instance, the farm I'm currently living on, I know there's two bulls that travel through this one valley at the back over here. Um, at any given time at a set time period, like, right out of the rut season. So that pathway, that um, behavior is pretty. It's not 100% consistent, but it's consistent. It's consistent enough that you know that if you want a good opportunity on a good kudu bull, you're going to head straight to that valley and you're going to glass a vast area where you've seen that kudu bull before. What happens is during the full moon, and I've experienced this, is that often we would glass a bull, we would leave him there for the night, and then come back early that morning to try and catch up to him. But during the full moon periods, they've moved on 6 or 7 valleys down the way. They've moved on as because they feel that they're not safe during the full moon. So the more they keep moving, the better it is for them. And again, guys, I'm speaking from personal experience here. So, for instance, this past weekend, we we knew there were big bulls in the area. We really did. Now, I can't tell you whether they were bedding down during the full moon period or eating or grazing during the full moon period at night and then bedding down once that sun comes over the horizon and bedding down for the remainder of the day, which is very, very possible because during the evening, during the full moon periods, they could be grazing, they could be heading off to their watering holes, they could be moving into places where they found sanctuary away from perceived predators, right? And I'm not making any excuses why we didn't get anything this weekend, but what I'm trying to say is that there could be a huge possibility behind this. So it brings me back right back to the beginning when I mean, I always remember I'm talking about two different, completely different aspects of the outdoors here. Is when I was a kid and I used to go fishing with my old man. If we wanted to catch game fish and throw in rapala or popper at night was our best success. So often we would plan our fishing trips around the full moon. Not only was it better for the tides, which I think makes a lot of sense when it comes to fishing, um, but it also played better for the species of fish that we were targeting at the time, whether it be Gary, cob, whatever it may be. And in fishing, there's a couple different more variables to it, but from a basic logical sense, when I look at situations, do the animals I often, and it's part of the beauty about, um, I think our industry or what we enjoy doing, and that's hunting. I think a lot of things leave us questioning our skills, questioning our knowledge on what we have out there, and most importantly, understanding what we need to do to make ourselves a better hunter. Does that mean now that I'm going to go out and consider the moon on every single safari that I do? Probably not. But when situations like this occur, there's a couple of different factors because it's going to change the way you hunt, right? And it's going to change the way you plan and perceive the next couple of days, whether it be in a safari. So, for instance, now, we're heading out this weekend to go and hunt kudu and lechwe. For me, I personally don't think it has a very big impact on lechwe because they like certain environments and habitats where you can have a better opportunity to look at. Whereas kudu, they prefer mountainous areas, flatlands, trees, wherever the grazing is going to be good, or browsing, let me call it that, wherever it's going to be better for them, those are the pockets that they're going to be more attracted to. And that's where we're going to start. Now, does it mean that when I see this kudu bull at that in the later parts of the evening, that I will be able to leave him there and maybe come back the next day? I'm a little bit more confident about next weekend than I was about this weekend after I realized that the full moon was out. So I often find myself asking myself these questions because for somebody who's been in the industry for more than 14 years now, you kind of wonder that, but hang on, yeah, maybe I should have known this a long time ago and I shouldn't have wasted my time on hunting this particular species this weekend. I should have focused on something else that we had planned for next weekend. However, I think these things come up in our careers that help us to learn a little bit better on what we need to do to make ourselves a better hunter. And yeah, like I said, without any concrete evidence, I know what's the gentleman now? Craig Bonington. I know he's done a couple of researches and he's written a couple of articles about this particular topic. And I know there have been a couple of books written and hunters testifying and agreeing to that the moon doesn't have an effect on deer species and certain other antelope species. But I kind of think that every scenario is going to be different. And when I say that, I don't think a lot of the time, I think a lot of the time we generalize. And I think a lot of the time we see ourselves as it not really working out as according to plan. And then we count so many different variables of what it could be, but we never really take into consideration some of the most basic ones out there. And we often forget about our general rule of thumb and try and compensate that with a little bit more complex theory behind it. So for me, if I had to come to any kind of conclusion, I would say that yes, full moon has definitely, definitely a big effect on certain species that you are planning to hunt. Um, regardless whether there's predators in your area, whether there's no predators in your area, animal behavior around a situation like a full moon, which happens it is not an everyday occurrence, they are going to react and act differently during that period. So yeah, guys, like I said, with this podcast, it was very short and sweet, but I felt like I've given myself this platform to ask these questions, not only to myself, but to the broader spectrum out there. And I often wonder about other people's experiences. For the gentleman that was sitting around the campfire who's been in the industry for more than 30 years, I think it was at the time, to tell us that, wait, hang on, don't even consider the full moon because it might not have a bigger impact than what you think. To where I find myself now a couple of years later saying, well, hang on, yeah, maybe it does have an impact. We're just oblivious to it now because our ratio of, well, our opportunities when it didn't have an effect were there. And I think that's a very broad spectrum that we are working with. So if you guys have had any sort of or believe that the moon has any sort of impact on hunting certain species in South Africa and Africa, excluding predators, because I know predators kind of seems like a common knowledge thing to me that the lighter it is, the better their opportunities are on hunting specific prey. they can see better, they can plan better. It makes a little bit more sense. But when it comes to animals, specifically your spiral horn animals, or specifically South African based antelope or African based antelope, does it have a bigger effect on it? Are animals more alert during the full moon period? Do they seek refuge a lot better, or do they actually just carry on with their grazing patterns that they have? But instead of doing it during the day, they're doing it at night now, and then during the day they're resting. All the roles reversed. So these are a couple of questions that I always ask myself. And when I put myself in these sort of situations, I kind of play it out and see, but hang on, does that theory kind of seems a little bit plausible to this situation? For instance, this past weekend, like the full moon theory that they're grazing and they're moving more at night, bedding down during the day, seems a little bit more plausible for me during this sort of situation. And again, I could be looking for excuses, but that's I play, like I said, I play these scenarios out because I want to try and better my understanding on certain scenarios that we get put into in our hunting activities. So yeah, with that being said, um I don't think in this episode I've kind of answered any problems or anything out there. It's kind of like I've had this conversation with you guys, and I would love to hear from you guys if you guys have had any sort of experiences out there with the full moon. And what's your theory? I understand there are a lot of articles, and I've read numerous amounts of them this afternoon uh, about the full moon theory. But once again, I don't think it quite gives concrete evidence to it being completely washed out. So, yeah, I would love to hear your guys' side of it, and hopefully we can have a little bit more of a discussion about this. But yeah, guys, with that being said, thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of the podcast. I am super proud to announce that we have eventually joined the YouTube program, and it's only a matter of time now before you guys see us all over Carbon Core TV. And I'm really looking forward to this journey. It's been a long time coming, and yeah, I'm very, very excited. Some really exciting news has probably come up in the past 24 hours. There is a huge possibility that this year I get to go over to the US and hunt Sika deer, which is for me an unbelievable opportunity. It's either going to happen this year or next year, but it is going to happen. I'm really looking forward to that one. And yeah, our opportunities next weekend. Hopefully, I get to jump on this market and tell you guys about some successful hunts that happen next weekend. I'm really, really looking forward to it. My season ends mid-August as a professional hunter. However, I'll still carry on trying to put a couple of episodes through on my YouTube. I've got a couple of bucket list animals that I still want to tick off with the bow. So my adventures won't be stopping. It's just my PHing that kind of takes a little bit of a backseat. And I've had an incredible season. I can't thank everyone for the amount of support. And if you guys have enjoyed this episode, I'd really appreciate it. If you guys haven't yet, hit the subscribe button, turn on the notifications. And if you enjoyed this episode, drop a thumbs up or drop a comment and tell me what your experiences have been. Because, guys, every sort of interaction on the algorithm or wherever it may be helps me for the future. And I'm really, really looking forward to the future. If you guys haven't yet, see my episode of the Fellow Deer on my YouTube channel. You guys can catch it in the latest edition of the Volten Yach. I'm going to try and get this page here now. I had the fortunate opportunity of writing the article on our experience, and it was an incredible one to say the least. And I'm very, very fortunate to share this with the rest of you guys. So if you guys haven't yet, head along, grab your latest edition or the July edition of the Boltignach. And yeah, I look forward to sharing that one with you guys. So to close it off, if you are, happy hunting. Until then, stay safe, stay blessed, stay humble. We'll catch up with you guys soon. Cheers.